Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In IELTS Writing Task 1, we often describe static bar charts or tables. These charts show information at one point in time, so we cannot talk about changes over time. Instead, we need to compare categories. Look at these charts. You can see the numbers and you can see the differences. But how do you describe them in English? How do you turn what you see into powerful, accurate sentences? That's when adjectives are so important. To describe data, you need to master two specific types, comparative and superlative adjectives. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to use them to describe any chart or table with confidence. Let's start with a quick review. You have probably learnt about comparative and superlative adjectives before. We use them to make comparisons. First, let's look at comparatives. We use them to compare two things, usually to show a difference. You can usually spot them because they use the word than. Here we have two phones, the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra and the older Galaxy Young. To describe the difference, we can say the S25 Ultra is newer than the Galaxy Young, or it's more advanced than the Galaxy Young. Notice the structure, adjective plus er plus than, or more plus adjective plus than. Now let's look at superlatives. We use them when we have three or more things and want to pick out the top one. Now let's add a third phone, the Galaxy Note 10 Plus. Now we have three models. Looking at all of them, the S25 Ultra is clearly the top model. So we can say the S25 Ultra is the newest of all three, or it's the most advanced phone here. Notice the structure, the plus adjective plus est, or the most plus adjective. Now that we know when to use comparatives and superlatives, let's look at how to form them correctly. The spelling of these adjectives follows clear rules, depending on the adjective. For example, we said newer in one place, but more advanced in another. Why is that? Let's break it down. Let's look at the rule behind using er in one place and more in another. Why is that? It depends on the number of syllables in the adjective. For most short one-syllable adjectives like tall or fast, it's simple. Just add er or est. So we get taller than or the tallest, faster than or the fastest. Two-syllable adjectives can be tricky. The most important rule to remember is for words ending in y, like happy or busy. You change the y to an I and add er or est. So we get happier than or the happiest, busier than or the busiest. But for other two-syllable adjectives and for all longer words with three or more syllables, we don't add er or est. Instead, we use more for the comparative and most for the superlative. For example, two-syllable words like famous or honest and three-syllable words like important or expensive always follow this rule. And finally, there are a few very common irregular adjectives that don't follow any rules. You simply have to memorize them. Good becomes better and best, and bad becomes worse and worst. The main thing to remember is the pattern. Now that we have refreshed our memory, let's see how important this grammar is to describe bar charts clearly and correctly. Let's apply the grammar we learned. This chart shows illiteracy rates in different regions of the world in 2000 divided by gender. It gives us many opportunities for comparisons. To describe it, we need both comparative and superlative adjectives. First, let's use comparatives to analyze differences. We can compare regions, and we can also compare genders within a region. When comparing regions, we can say illiteracy rates were significantly higher in the Arab states than in Latin America. Rates in East Asia were considerably lower than those in South Africa. When comparing genders within a region, we can say, in the Arab states, the illiteracy rate was higher among women than among men, 51% compared to 30%. In Latin America, female illiteracy was slightly higher than male illiteracy, 11% compared to 10%. Now let's use superlatives to describe the extremes. Look at the female column. The highest rate is 55% in South Asia, and the lowest is 5% in developed countries. South Asia had the highest illiteracy rates for both men and women. Developed countries had the lowest illiteracy rates overall. South Asia had the largest gender gap in illiteracy. Latin America had the most balanced male and female rates at 10% and 11% respectively. You have seen how it is done. Now, it's your turn to apply these rules. Let's practice with a few questions to make sure you've got it. Now let's practice. Look at the chart and try to answer these 4 questions. Pause the video, read the questions carefully, and take a moment to think. If you like, write your answers in your notebook. Here are the model answers. Read these sentences and notice how comparatives help us compare 2 groups, while superlatives highlight the highest or lowest points. Take your time to read through them. Now that you have seen one example, let's move on and try another chart together. Here is another practice activity. Look carefully at this chart. First, answer the comparative questions. You will compare 2 sports or 2 groups at a time. For example, which sport was more popular among boys, tennis or badminton? Then answer the superlative questions. These ask about the highest, lowest, or most balanced categories. For example, which sport was the most popular among boys? Take a few minutes to write your answers in your notebook. Remember to use comparative forms like more popular than and superlative forms like the most popular or the least popular. This time, I won't show you the model answers. Try it on your own, and then we'll move to a different type of task. Now let's look at another example. There's no difference from the previous activities except that the information is shown in a table instead of a bar chart. It's simply a change in visual format. The grammar is the same. We still use comparative and superlative adjectives to describe the data. Here are some examples. Computer science had more male students than business, 68% compared to 55%. The proportion of female students was significantly higher in arts and humanities than in computer science, 60% as opposed to 32%. Engineering had the highest percentage of male students. Medicine had the highest proportion of female students. Hope you have understood how to make sentences from the information given in a table. Now let's practice. Look at these 5 questions. Use comparative and superlative adjectives to make sentences. Write your answers in your notebook, and then I'll show you the model answers. Let's check the answers together. For the first comparative, the percentage of male students was higher in arts and humanities than in medicine, 40% compared to 35%. Next, for the second comparative, the percentage of female students was higher in arts and humanities than in business, 60% as opposed to 45%. Now, the superlatives. Medicine was the least preferred field by male students, with only 35%. The second lowest percentage of female students was in computer science, at 32%. And finally, engineering had the largest gender gap, with 72% male students and 28% female students. So, we have seen how to form clear comparative and superlative sentences from a table. You can notice that the grammar is the same whether we describe a static bar chart or a table. Only the visual changes. Now let's try another example with a different data set. This time, we will look at household expenditure for higher income and lower income households. This table shows the percentage of household expenditure in 2018, comparing higher income and lower income households across 5 categories: food and drink, housing, transport, education, and entertainment. Take a look at these questions. Write your answers in your notebook using proper comparative and superlative sentences. I'll give you some time to think, and then we will check the model answers together. All right, let's check the answers together. For the comparatives, lower income households spent more on food and drink than higher income households, 45% compared to 20%. In contrast, higher income households allocated more of their budget to transport, 25% as opposed to 20%. And within higher income households, spending on education was higher than spending on entertainment, 15% against 5%. Now we will look at the superlatives. Housing took up the largest share of expenditure in higher income households at 35%. In lower income households, food and drink was the single greatest expense at 45%. And finally, both education and entertainment were the least important categories for lower income households, each at 10%. Again, notice how comparatives highlight the differences between two categories, while superlatives show the extremes, the largest, the greatest, or the least. Before we finish, let's quickly review some tips. Use comparative adjectives when you are comparing two categories, and superlative adjectives when you are comparing 3 or more. Always remember, add than with comparatives, and don't forget the definite article the with superlatives. To make your sentences stronger, try using variety. Expressions like slightly higher, considerably lower, the second lowest, or the largest gap show accuracy and range. Be careful when describing superlatives. Sometimes two categories share the same highest or lowest value. And finally, always include the numbers in your sentences, like percentages or totals. This makes your description precise and clear. Thank you so much for watching this lesson on using comparative and superlative adjectives to describe static bar charts and tables in IELTS Writing Task 1. I hope you now feel more confident about how to compare two categories with comparatives and how to highlight the highest or lowest points with superlatives. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more IELTS writing strategies. See you in the next lesson, and best of luck with your IELTS preparation.